Welcome to the FOCIS podcast, brought to you by the FOCIS Communications Committee.
Well, hello, Dr. Levings. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. To start off this podcast, what research have you conducted that you're most proud of, or papers that you would like to talk about?
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Larissa, to chat with you today. I was just reflecting on how the papers that I'm most proud of are probably the ones that were most difficult to come to. My lab's been meandering through various aspects of Treg biology for more than 20 years. I think we published some really important papers early on in my career about how FOXP3 biology is really different in human Tregs and compared to mouse Tregs, with identification of two isoforms, and then discovering how to overexpress FOXP3 to induce Tregs. But more recently, I think I'm most proud of our work that we've been doing to figure out how to genetically engineer Tregs, first with our work to modify their specificity by overexpressing CARs, and now using CRISPR genome editing to really do different types of advanced editing of Tregs. And I think these tools are really shedding new light on the biology of the cells, as well as creating bespoke products that we can use in different therapeutic applications.
Oh, well, that sounds really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So then what would you say is new on the horizon for immunology?
What I'm really excited about now is, I think, two things. One is the immune organoid field. So having worked in human immunology for many years, a continual frustration is the limited ways that you can study and ask mechanistic questions about human immune cells, and the tendency to be limited to very simplistic in vitro models, or to have to go to the very complex humanized mouse models, which are expensive and may or may not reflect real biology. But now that there are these systems coming out to look at sort of organs on chips and immune organoids, where you can try and recapitulate aspects of combining real human immune cells and complex systems together with non-immune tissues, I think is really going to open up the way that we can study and understand cell therapies like Tregs and many other aspects of immunology. And then the other area I'm really excited to see expanding is the interest in understanding the different immune diseases under a single umbrella. So trying to do compare and contrast type studies to understand, for example, how diabetes might be similar to MS and vice versa. So rather than working in disease silos, working more broadly across many different diseases to try and understand the immune system more holistically.
Well, that sounds very exciting. So then moving on to FOCIS, how did you first get involved with FOCIS?
So I've been part of FOCIS for a really long time. My first FOCIS meeting was when I was a postdoctoral fellow with Maria Garcia-Roncarolo, a previous FOCIS president. And I remember her coming to the lab one day when I was a fellow saying, there's this new meeting called FOCIS that's starting. I think it's going to be really good. Would you like to go? And at that time I was working in Italy, so it was a chance for me to come back to North America. So I jumped at that, of course, and just immediately found that this was for sure my scientific home, and eventually became my home for many different ways. But it's just a meeting where you get this broad perspective of everything that's going on in translational immunology. And it's this incredible mix of people who are working all the way from basic mouse models in vitro systems to clinical trials in many different disease contexts. And I think it's the meeting. When I come home, I always have a big list of notes with highlights of questions we need to follow up on from every meeting that I go to. And by far, FOCIS is the one that I come back with the most questions, new ideas, discussion with the lab, because when you hear about science being done in different fields, it just sparks concepts and allows you to integrate maybe a question that you've been working on in your own lab, and then you can get an idea from a different field about how you might address that question.
That's very nice. We're glad to have you on Team for FOCIS. So how would you say FOCIS has changed your world?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what I said in response to the previous question. It really has allowed me, well, first of all, working on regulatory T cells, they're broadly applicable in many different diseases. So following up from focus meetings, I've branched out to work on the context of Tregs in different disease contexts based on new ideas I've had from focus. So, for example, going beyond classical immune diseases, thinking about how Tregs might be relevant in non-immunological diseases, and meeting new people from across many different disease contexts.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today.
It was a pleasure. Nice for the chat.
And now we will hear from Dr. Hans-Dieter Volk, a previous board member of FOCIS.
Well, hello, Dr. Vokes. Thank you so much for being here today. Why don't we start with what sort of research are you conducting and what are you most proud of?
It's not an easy question, but I think I'm very long in the business. I have to say, I started as a student and now I have 50 years immunology work. That means I can tell many stories I like. But I think the most important thing, because I'm clinical immunologist, I'm on one hand PhD and MD, and I want to bring things to the patient. And therefore, I'm mostly proud on things which were realized for patient's benefit. That means, for example, new diagnostic tests or new insights in the pathogenesis of a disease, or even new therapeutics. That I think is my personal favor, of course. Not so much, of course, to like to have as a scientist to have Nature paper or whatever. I have it, but I'm more proud on the result, on the translation than on impact factor. That I would say in principle. If I should select one, okay, that's not easy. I would say the most thing which was against the mainstream was our sepsis story. That is not a new one. It's more than 20 years now, but that was against the mainstream. At this moment, it was a story that TNF, the tumor necrosis factor, is a key molecule for sepsis. Everybody targets TNF, and we say the opposite is wrong. To do it, we have to stimulate the immune system because the patients are in immunoparalysis, in contrast to the mouse experiments. And that, I think, resulted in a completely new view, and that I think I'm very proud on this because I was relatively young at this time, and to go against the mainstream was not an easy way. But therefore, it's much easier than to go with the mainstream. Yeah, that's, I think, is to select just one.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Do you have any advice to share with someone just starting out in the field?
I think it would continue this way. I think, first of all, it's very important to work interdisciplinarity. It's not longer the case that you can do everything alone. That means you must be open-minded, you must be fair in the communication, but also in the exploitation of the results, not the discussion who is the last and first author. Believe on your story is more important than all the positions. And I think, and don't go the mainstream foods, because that is in continuation with what I told before. I think it's very important to think about problems and to look for new solutions and go in this way. And that is my most important points, I would say.
Well, that is a really good piece of advice for our immunologists starting out in the field. So then, to wrap up, in what ways do broader social and economic factors influence the progress or focus of your research?
Okay, that is, of course, there exists 0 points. We have actual situation. I will come back in a minute. In my past, of course, I have to say I have a special history because I came from the former East Germany, as the communist part in the Russian area of Europe. And my first 10 years of my life, my scientific life, not of my life, but my scientific life, was in this time, and of course was different conditions. Fortunately, I had good advisors saying, go into translation and look for bringing things to patients. And therefore, of course, it was a dramatic change in the moment as Germany was reunificated and all the systems came in a good way. That was, of course, economically a completely different situation. And now we could do much more in science than before. But nevertheless, I think from the time before, I learned to be effective and with the resources and to think, what can you do with the highest value from your money you have? That is helpful in the moment because we see again a little bit the crisis in the budgets for research, not only here in the US, but also in Europe because of all the challenges in the politics which bring the money to whatever, but not to science. And that means we have also more scientists. There's more competition, but the money is not as high as the number of competitive scientists grow up. Nevertheless, I think that was the most important things, and therefore I think you should more drive to ideas and not only look for getting the maximum on money. And therefore, it's very important to interact with others. That is, I think, the most important thing, I think.
Right. Well, that was very interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me today.
It was my pleasure.